Hey, we're so glad that you could join us here on our podcast at Ashland Christian Fellowship. You will notice different voices from gifted men and women as we discuss relevant and encouraging topics. And don't forget to subscribe either to our YouTube channel or Spotify. We hope you enjoy today's topic and that the Lord speaks to you. God bless.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to Verified. We are super excited to have you joining us today because we are doing a testimony, and the testimony of none other than Buddy Grove. Buddy Grove, the man, the myth, the legend. Yes. Buddy Grove. And kind of a fun side note, historically on our podcast, I don't know if we can say historically yet, Brett, because the podcast has only been out for like a year. It's historical at that point. We actually started this just on testimonies. And that's all we used to do in the podcast, just record people's testimonies. And as the Lord grew it, we started doing more with conversations, and we got more equipment and the table and all this. So it's kind of fun getting back to our roots, buddy, doing your testimony.
Good. That's great.
Well, I wanted to personally thank you and welcome you to the show. I know this is your first time, but I wanted to thank you for being a part of it and coming on and being willing to share. I know that when you and I met, was that 6 months ago now or longer?
Maybe a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, well, 6 months to 8 months ago. And you shared with me your testimony that it was powerful and impactful to me as well. So I'm excited for other people to get a chance to hear it too.
Oh, good. I'd be glad to present it.
So I have just a couple questions for you, and I'll let you do whatever you want. You know, buddy, did you bring some jokes, by the way?
I take the fifth on that.
You take the fifth on that? Okay. Buddy is one of the funniest people you'll ever meet.
It's what my wife says also.
So I want to let you go with it the way you want to go too, but I did write out some questions to kind of help us guide it. So the first question I'd ask you is, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little burg of a place called Washington, Indiana. Washington, Indiana's claim to fame was that Red Skelton was born in Vincennes, Indiana, which was 11 miles from Washington, and that's Washington's only tribute that they had to Red Skelton.
This is going to be really bad, but I don't know who Red Skelton is.
You don't? You don't?
No.
He was a comedian in the 50s that was on TV, and your older generation, myself included, that's out there listening to this, they would know who Red Skelton was. He was one funny man. And the unusual thing was, now this might remind you of somebody else, but he would laugh at his own jokes.
Are you thinking of you?
Yeah, I am. I am.
I laugh at my own jokes too.
I noticed that.
Even when other people don't laugh, I still think they're funny.
I do. You know, that's the way I look. I mean, somebody's getting some enjoyment out of it, right?
If nobody is, it might as well be you, right?
Might as well. Yeah. Who else?
So Red Skelton. So you said he was a comedian in the 50s. So when were you born, buddy?
I was born in 1945.
1940s?
March 12th.
Whoa.
Yeah. I know, isn't that wild?
That's a very different America you grew up in.
It was, and with some of the things that I'm going to share today, you would see how it is different, and not necessarily for the better.
Yeah.
But it definitely was different.
Wow. Man, that's incredible. What a heritage. I'm looking forward to hearing about it. So 1945, you were born. What was your home life like?
It was really a fractured home life. I had my father. My mother was not part of my life.
Your whole life?
Pretty much not my whole life. Washington's at that time had a population of maybe 7,000 people or 8,000 at the most, and I would see her, but there wasn't much of a relationship there, and it wasn't based on me as much as it was her. And then I had 3 older sisters, and the youngest sister, close to my age, was 7 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
And so we lived together in a 4-bedroom house, coal stoves, no hot water, and, carrying in coal and carrying out ashes. And then when you had to bathe, you put this big tub thing on the stove, and get some hot water and go throw it in the tub. And
Wow.
yeah, it was different. And with our mother not being there, the 3 daughters and myself and Dad, it was still pretty crowded. I slept on a rollaway bed. Some people probably don't know what that is, in the kitchen next to the coal stove. And
Did the bed come out of a drawer?
no, it was a fold up, and I would put it against the wall. I'd fold it up in the mornings and put it against the wall, and then take it down at night and sleep on it. And
Oh, wow.
it's kind of worked that way.
Wow. So mom was in the picture.
Right.
You're pretty young compared to your closer siblings, so there's quite a bit of a gap.
Yeah.
So did you feel lonely a lot growing up?
I did, and especially having 3 sisters. But, there was other kids in the neighborhood and everything else that it worked out pretty well.
Did you have electricity?
We had electricity, and the electricity would be one light bulb again at the table in the kitchen, and then almost every room had one bulb in it. There was none of this fluorescent lighting or anything like that. It was just kind of it was a house, but it wasn't a very modern house or anything like that.
Yeah.
And it actually got a little bit worse. My father worked for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and back in those days there was quite a few layoffs and then come back to work and all that. And when he got laid off from work, he would find other construction to do. And one of the things that happened in 1954, they would tear down the old houses. We lived in the bad part of town, the west end of Washington. And my dad was driving the truck, and it had a cut-off cab, and he had a big boom on the back that had about a 6-foot railroad rail attached to it, and he would drive up close to the houses that were supposed to be tore down, and he would swing the boom around and tear it down that way slowly. And it got away from him one day where he actually, with the truck, struck the house lightly that they were tearing down, and it swung around and hit him in the back and knocked him out of the truck. And then while he was down on his hands and knees, it fell on his spine. So I was in school at that time, West End School, and my uncle came over and said, "We need to take you home." And they took me home to my sisters because they'd already brought them home from school. And my uncle explained to me that Dad was in the hospital, and he ended up staying, and I know people probably won't believe this, but it's true. He stayed in that hospital for 13 years.
Wow.
And
because he couldn't walk, or
he was, they didn't know the damage, but it was just a small hospital, and they had a specialty hospital called Robert Long up in Indianapolis, which was 100 miles up the road, and they never bothered to send him up there. And so he was a paraplegic for the rest of his life.
Wow.
And that really affected things quite a bit. And my sisters, one by one, got married and left. And I think I was either 11 or 12 years old when there was just me and my dad. And it was kind of tough, because I cook now. I cook now a lot for my wife. I cook all the time for my wife. I love doing that. But I wasn't a cook when I was 11 or 12, and neither was my dad. Our big deal was on a holiday like Thanksgiving or Christmas or something, he would fix oyster dressing, which when it goes in the oven, and it's really not a great dish. I wouldn't suggest that you try that. And then he was also big into Braunschweiger, Liversworth, Limburger cheese. And, we just kind of did. And, for the injury that he sustained, I still remember because I went to the store and cashed the checks and everything. We were living on $43.20 every 2 weeks. And that was to buy groceries and pay utilities. And I remember that sometimes I'd forget and leave a light bulb on and say, "Bud boy, turn that light off. That's costing us money." Seriously. I mean, that's the way it was. But we got along good. We had a good relationship. And
So you said 13 years he was in the hospital.
13 months.
13 months,
Yeah.
okay. And then he gets out, and then your sisters kind of move on. So it's just you and him. Was he in a wheelchair then, or is he just...
He was in a wheelchair, and they had, needless to say, they didn't have the fancy braces that they have in this day and age, but they had the old locking braces and everything. And I'd help him get out of the wheelchair, and we would move the chairs out of the way and everything, and my roll-away bed, and we would walk around the table with me walking behind him because it's difficult to be walking stiff-legged with crutches and without falling until you get used to them. And we eventually just kept doing circles like that until he did pretty well. He would eventually, we rigged up a thing where he could step off the front porch and then walk on the street and go talk to a friend that he had across the street about a house down from us. And so it worked out pretty well. I was going to the school at that time, and then I would come home and everything. Things work out from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So pretty traumatic.
I beg your pardon?
Pretty traumatic event.
It was, and the thing was, at first, and I didn't have proper supervision or anything, and I was going to a Catholic school because my dad was a strong Catholic, and therefore I was baptized as a baby and all that, but I was going to the Catholic school, and in the middle of the second grade, they decided they didn't want me to go to their school anymore. I won't go into great detail what that was about. It wasn't any big thing. It wasn't criminal or anything like that. But the nuns kind of, they were pretty tough back then. They would wrap your knuckles with rulers and things like that. And, they became very stern and strict. And you know how the nuns, if it was it, they have a habit.
Bad habit.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
But so they kicked me out, and I went to the West End School, which I was in the middle of the second grade because I had to drop a grade but it was a wonderful time for me because. Number one, I was the smartest kid in class because all the other second graders were printing, the letters and everything, and I was doing cursive.
Wow.
Isn't that neat?
It's so neat.
And also, this opened up the deal for me to get into police work because they made me a crossing guard, and that was the start of my police career.
Really?
I know that doesn't make sense, but Sandy laughed when I told her that joke when we went back there and I did different things. But anyway, it was good.
I'm not Sandy, buddy. I'm not going to laugh that easily.
I know you're not. You got all the jokes. Go ahead.
I'm just teasing.
I know you are.
So we kind of covered a couple of the questions I had. I wanted to talk to you about those early years, things like that. Where did you end up attending high school at, and what was your first job?
Well, number one, and I do have to be honest about this because Sandy knows I'm telling the truth. When I was 16, I had a a girlfriend that lived about 100 miles up the road, and one day at school, she came down unexpectedly, and I found out she was there during the lunch hour. And so I just hopped in her car. She drove down, and we went to Dad's house. And, you know, and we had a date that night and everything else. And then she visited her grandmother, who happened to live in Washington. And so I went to bed that night and on my little rollaway bed, and Dad came in the morning, and he said, "Bud, boy, it's time to get up and go to school." And I said, "Well, I quit yesterday." And I did. I quit when I was 16, just to be with
Just to be with her?
yeah, be with Terry. Teresa was her name. And yeah, I quit. But
So you didn't finish high school?
I didn't finish high school, but then later on, and as I get into the jobs and everything, I did obtain a GED, which was high enough to get my diploma, and then I got a couple of years of college also because of the jobs I had to take to get the jobs. Yeah.
Wow.
Strange life.
A
isn't it?
strange life, man.
Oh,
You know,
wow.
a man has been quitting things for women since the garden, right?
It's always the woman, right?
It's always-
No, don't say that.
Brett, can you cut that out?
Yeah.
Buddy said that, not me. It's actually so true. Sorry, this is a side note, but I was a youth pastor for years, and the things I saw teenage boys do for girls, you know what I mean?
It's a different world.
It's a different world. So what was your first job then?
My first job was working in a service station for $2 an hour.
Like car service station?
Yeah, you know, gas, and pump the gas and everything, and they didn't do much else. Didn't do any lubes and oils changes and all that. All they did basically was just pump gas. And
How much was gas back then?
Oh my! Best I remember 25.9 for ethyl.
Wow.
Or premium, whatever you want to call it. And this guy really, he kind of took advantage of me. I was making like $10 a day, you know, for $2 an hour or whatever. And he just kind of used me and everything. But that's okay. I mean, I had some spending money that way,
Yeah.
because Dad didn't have, you know, any money other than $43.20. And
Well, you would have made more money than your dad got every 2 weeks, just in 1 week working.
yeah, and you know, I enjoyed it because I got to meet people and talk to them and everything, and so it wasn't boring pumping gas for every 5 or 6 days a week or whatever. It's strange.
So was that one of the old where it would like fill up the glass piece at the top and then would slowly gravity feed out?
Yeah, it would, you know.
I've seen one.
Yeah.
My dad found one antique. He was so stoked because he grew up in South America and they had stuff like this. And so he brought it home and he explained to us that you would pump the gas up
Uh-huh.
and then it would slowly kind of come out. So how long did it take to fill up a gas tank?
Quite some time. They didn't have much pressure at that point, you know, in time. You know, it got better near the end, you know. It's strange, without a doubt.
Well, that's awesome. So I take it you got the job closer to your girlfriend, or did you live near your dad?
No, I stayed at home.
Okay.
You know, I couldn't. But you know what? There was a guy across the street. And like I say, I was kind of a hoodlum, but his name was Woody Veal, and I still remember him. He was about the age of my dad. My dad was 46 when he got hurt. And Woody, as time went on, I wanted to go in the service because I knew I could make some money in the service. And so when I was 18, that's when I decided to join the Marines, and I did that with Dad's blessings, because I would be making more money, and I would send it to him, and he could, you know, survive on what I gave him.
Well, and it probably helped get you out of trouble a little bit too. He was probably gave you some
did.
direction.
Yeah, I did. I needed direction, and if you don't get directions from the Marines, then you're not going to get it from anybody, because they'll beat it into you. But this
Hoorah!
Hoorah! Yeah, hoorah! This Woody Veal. I had talked to him. I was at an age mature enough to be able to speak to him, and he had this thing about him, and I couldn't figure it out. But he told me, he says, "I'll take care of your dad while I volunteered for 4 years, not 2 years, not 3 years. I went for all bore for 4 years." And so I joined for 4 years, and he says, I'll take care of him for 4 years. I'll carry in his coal, take out his ashes. Not going to charge him anything, because I live right across the street, and he's a nice man. And I really felt blessed by that.
Was Woody a Christian?
I didn't know it at the time, but then I look back, and Sandy and I have had this discussion. You bet he was. His whole family was. And they were the only one. Dad had a lot of friends before he got hurt, he'd drink a beer at a tavern now and then and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? The friends all went away.
Yeah.
And, it's like, you're a wounded deer or something. People just walk away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was sad. And, but he had Woody. And he did.
So Woody is kind of the introduction of Jesus into your testimony, because I take it your dad, your mom, your siblings weren't believers.
Dad, like I say, I don't know his true beliefs, but I do know that he was a strong Catholic. And, he had an outfit called St. Vincent de Paul. Of course, they've been around for years. And every Christmas, they would bring us 2 sacks of groceries. And that was kind of our Christmas, other than my sisters, what they gave to us and everything. And Dad appreciated stuff like that too. And but he couldn't get out and go to church or anything. And of course, there's not many priests that's going to come around and do a service for him in the home.
And you weren't going to take yourself to church at that time.
No. I really look back and I feel sorry, I guess, for myself that I wasted numerous years that I could have known the Lord. And you know what? But I met somebody.
Yeah.
And that whole thing changed. I mean, it changed quickly. Sandy, her family was large. And they would have get-togethers, and when we were dating, and this was in Southern California after I got out of the Marine Corps.
So how many years is this now? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I spent 4 years, and then I came back and worked in Washington for about a year, and then I went to California with a paratrooper buddy of mine.
Because you served active duty, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was the thing, there was the thing in Vietnam. I volunteered, the last year I was in military police for 2 years, or 3 years. They wanted people to volunteer to go to Vietnam, and I did.
As an officer, right?
No, I was a sergeant.
Okay.
I wasn't an officer, but I went to Vietnam, and there they had what they call a CAC unit, Combined Action Company. They'd take a squad of Marines and a Navy corpsman, a medic, and a sergeant, and put us in a village. And we would, you'll love this, we would sit around at night, the sergeant especially, and talk with the elders of the village. Isn't that weird? And we would sit around a big pot of rice with all these condiments and everything. You had no idea what you were eating, and you saw all these little weevils in the pot of rice, but you didn't want to offend them, so you would still eat, and a lot of times they would eat just with their hands. but that's how we and
Were you looking for information?
yeah, we wanted information because the Viet Cong, they were in that area. The North Vietnamese had not been able to get down their army past Dong Ha, and we were in Phu Loc district, and we would do 2 daylight patrols and then a nighttime patrol and an ambush. And there was a guy named Billy Dean Laraway who was from Seymour, Indiana, which was up the road from me, and we didn't know each other prior to the service. But when we met and went through training for this CAC unit thing, we got to know each other, and he was a good dude. And one night on patrol, he was Larry, or Billy Dean was the machine gunner in our group, and we got ambushed, and our corpsman was shot through the legs with a round from the Viet Cong, and Billy Dean was just blazing away with his machine gun to hold him off, and then I know you hear this in movies, but he covered that corpsman with his body to protect him, and Billy died that night. And
Wow.
I haven't forgot that. And I in 2009 or 10, Sandy and I went to Israel with a group from the church here, and when I came back from that trip, all kinds of weird stuff. Sandy's dad died the day before we got back. He was in Rogue Valley Hospital. And then I had this urge. I wanted to contact somebody in Seymour, Indiana, from the Laraway family. And I was lucky enough. I dialed the operator, and she put me through to a Laraway that was the uncle. And the lady had set up a internet thing where Larry had won the Silver Star, which is the highest star you can get. And I know that didn't help Larry being dead, but Penny, his daughter, had set that up in his honor. And the uncle gave me her number because I told him who I was. And horrible stories people tell when they have a military funeral that you can't see this part of the body and all that. It was a closed casket thing. And I called her and told her who I was, that I was Buddy Grove, and we cried.
Yeah.
Big time. I mean, we just kept crying, and she was so happy to hear. And, in my naive way of thinking at that point, she was probably 3 or 4 years old when he went to Vietnam.
Wow.
And what that led to was Penny. We talked over the years several times, and then she had or Larry's sister, Donna, was living in Florida, married to a Marine, and then Donna started calling me, Larry's sister.
Wow.
And she knew basically what happened. And anyway, so we got that and Donna and I still communicate, and she's a great, strong Christian, and we send Christmas cards, and it just, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, it just opens up things to you, but you have to be willing to take that opportunity, and it's just a blessing, and I've told Sandy, and Sandy's told me, as we get older, it's so much easier to cry, and to show compassion and help people out, and that's what we want to do. We went to Chuck Smith's Calvary Chapel, moved up here in '78. As Mark said something to me in the audience Sunday, that this church was just a Bible study, and I would get off graveyard shift, and Sandy and I would drive out to Applegate. Corson's out there sitting on a stool by the Applegate River, and people were laying around on the grass, and that was our church. But we had Bible studies at Clay Street Community Church. Anyway, I probably not giving you a chance to ask enough questions.
No, buddy,
I'm sorry.
that was great. No, don't.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that too about Vietnam. I know that was hard, and thank you for your service.
I appreciate that, and we have people here in the church that they've served, and they're hurting, and I would like to get to know them if I could. I mean, the church has changed quite a bit from what it was years ago, and I'm glad to see the change because there's a lot of enthusiasm going on.
Yeah,
and I like that. I really
Me
do.
too.
Even from Mark.
Oh man, I love it, buddy. So you're not saved at this point when you get out of the Marines, but was there something about being overseas, being at war, losing people that were friends? Was any of that pushing you towards there has to be more?
That there does, and it went that way. And I came back home, and then it was another maybe 2 years by the time that I went back to Indiana, stayed for a year. Then my buddy wanted me to come out and live with him as a paratrooper, and we had an apartment in Garden Grove, California, and we were party hardy. I had a Corvette. He had a Pantera.
Is this when you were working the elevator?
No, we were bellhops. We made more money as a bellhop. We would get our check every 2 weeks. We'd just come home and open up our dresser and just throw the checks in there. We didn't even, because all we did was carry cash, because everybody tips in cash and everything. And we worked at the Grand Hotel, 270 rooms. It was owned by the people of the Eisenhower Heritage, and the ball team stayed there and everything. And we had our own haberdasher, Joe and I. We didn't have one pair of jeans, tennis shoes. We had alligator shoes. We had three-piece suits. I kid you not, when Sandy and I started dating, when I met her, she says, "I can't believe the clothes you got." I said, "Well, it comes from Al Shudo, who I personally think Al might," now I can say it now, he probably was part of the mafia, because he had the store Rags for Men, and we would go in there and just buy everything, We had it was cool, but, it was crazy. And then we would go out, and at that point, drinking, and even at the Grand Hotel, we'd go there, and then we'd step outside, and these kids would come up, and we were dressed like the California Angels, because they were ball teams visiting there to play them. And the kids would, "Can I have your autograph?" And I would sign autographs, Buddy Grove, second base, and stuff like that. This crazy stuff. We're just nuts, man. Nuts. Why would we do that? No, but it did. But then about 6 months after that, I had this feeling, this ain't right.
Yeah.
This isn't me. And I went to an employment agency, and they sent me to Mills Floor Covering, which was Sandy's dad and his two brothers. And Sandy would come in at noon. She went to Orange Coast College, and she would come in at noon and help out in the books while everybody was at lunch. And I saw this beautiful girl, hair down to the middle of her back, brunette, just gorgeous. I mean, and so I started bringing my lunch to work. People were leaving, and then I'd go back and sit with her. And she was going through a bad spell too. She.
Did you make it any better, or?
I did. I would sit down across from her with my bagged lunch, and I would tell her jokes. Kind of like I would. And I was trying to cheer her up, and I kept asking her, I said, why don't we go out to lunch, won't you go out to lunch with me? And finally she agreed, and we went to Hamburger House, or one of those places down there. But she says, something like, "I'm not going to ride with you." I said, "Okay." And so she went, and she said, we'll meet there. And I said, okay. And so I think I drove over there, and then I walked in, and she had like 5 or 6 of the girls that worked with her sitting there, and just me, like she needed bodyguards or something, you know. But anyway, we started dating, and this is a true story, and she will admit it because I wouldn't give up. We dated, and we traveled around together, and with her parents, everybody was so wonderful. And I asked her at least 10 times to marry me.
Wow.
And on the 10th time, I think she wanted me to shut up, and we decided to get married.
She was playing hard to get, but you were playing hard to get rid of.
Yeah, I wasn't going anywhere. But then I went to the Long Beach Hospital, the VA, because I contacted a disease in Vietnam. And no, it's not what people think. It was called amoebic colitis, and it was where amoebas, the simplest form of life, they reproduce by splitting, and they can get in the food, the rice, the weevils, and all that. Yeah, but I didn't know that.
You're just eating the weevils.
The weevils, yeah. And so anyway, this doctor, he figured it out, and there was guys as young as me that had colostomies because of this disease. And what he did, this guy was from India, the doctor, and he ended up giving me a shot of terramycin in my rear end. And when he did that, my lips chapped, everything in my body almost dried out, my skin cracked. But it got rid of the amoebas, and you have to kill every one of them,
They just start spreading again.
Yeah, started spreading. But then Sandy and I wanted to get married February 13th because her parents got married February 13th. And this was 1970. And so we had to go before the hospital administrator, and he had to go through his book to give me a weekend pass so we could go to Vegas to get married. And he wanted to know that I would not be a health risk to other people. So we did. We made it to Las Vegas, and the guy gave us a VCR tape of the wedding. This guy was I'm not sure he was a pastor or what, but he married us, and then we got ill. Both of us did.
From the amoebas?
No, it wasn't the amoebas. We went to the circus room to watch the trapeze. They do it and we ate a couple of hot dogs, and that did us in that night. And we got really, really sick. And so the next day, and I think we had another day in the hotel, we came walking out of the lobby, and I mean, it was like TV. Our suitcases, we had clothes sticking out of them. I had bought a fifth of whiskey that I ended up pouring down the drain, and I filled it with water, and I had that under my arm as we're walking to the car.
You were so sick.
So we were so sick, we didn't want any of that. So anyway, that was basically our honeymoon. And what happened, we drove back to Orange, California, where her parents lived. I dropped her off at her house, and I went back to the hospital.
So was it the shot or the hot dogs that killed the amoebas?
It had to be those hot dogs. They'd been on the grill for quite some time.
Oh, that's gross. So are you saved at this point?
I am.
So, we missed that piece then.
No, I am, and I'll tell you why. Because I personally thought when we were going to Calvary Chapel, I had an experience in there when Chuck Smith was speaking.
So you actually, when you came back, were dating Sandy, you started going to Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
And listening to Chuck.
Yeah, and he was...
Did Sandy go with you, or were you going alone?
Oh no, because it started out, we had enough money that we bought a house in Huntington Beach. Her father gave us $200 as closing costs. Brand new house. And we made payments on that. We made enough money because I was a sheriff by then. I was deputy sheriff in Orange County for 4.5 years. And she would come in, and it's the old story that you hear all the time, because I'm sitting there, getting ready for the football games on Sunday, and she'd say, "Do you want to go to church with me?" I said, "Hey, I believe in God. I said, but yeah, I'd rather watch the game. I did that for a while. And finally, she convinced me that I needed to go. And she did, and I did, and it was a good thing. I didn't, other than that, in 76, we came up here in 78, 1976. I don't know what Chuck's message was, but it turned me. It turned me, and I just sit there, and everything became clear to me. And,
Wow.
And then we came up here in 78 and met Andy, and Andy and I formed a great relationship of playing lots of tennis, and we talked about God, and he blessed me, and he was just...
Wow.
It's just a bunch of old Jesus freaks, that just turned to the Lord, man.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Wow. So did that change your whole outlook and perspective on life, relationships?
Yeah.
Because you're in the police force, you're already seeing the gritty side of the world at this point.
Right.
A lot of brokenness.
Right.
And you come to Christ. How did that change things for you?
It changed things for me greatly, and if they would have caught me, I would have probably got fired for this. But when we had a holding cell at the Ashland Police Department, just for drunks and stuff like that, we'd keep them 24 hours and then release them. But other people that had to go to the county jail in Medford, we had to go there. And what I would do when I had to transport a prisoner, because we just had wire cages and between us, and I would talk to him, and I don't care what the charge was. I would talk to him, and kind of feel them out, how they felt about things a little bit. And I would drive slow. I'd take 99. I wouldn't take I-5 at 70 miles an hour. I'd go down 99 at about 30 miles an hour at 4 o'clock in the morning or somewhere when you were taking them to jail. And there was conversions.
Tell people about Jesus.
In a police car. I would. And Sandy will tell you this also. Way back then, I had 4 other policemen other than myself going to this church once it was built.
Wow.
And it was a great experience.
Was it kind of weird though, like talking to them, loving them to the Lord, seeing them get saved, and then dropping them off in the cell and be like, well, good luck with court.
Well,
and
we had one guy that was making bombs at the Colony Inn, which is at Siskiyou and Tara here in Ashland. It's where they have one kitchen and 4 rooms around it with somebody in each room. That's the apartment. We didn't call it the Colony Inn. The cops called it the Felony Inn, because you could go there and arrest people on warrants all the time, But this guy was a bomb maker. Literally, he was making bombs
and selling them.
No, he wasn't. He was thinking about using them.
Oh no!
And he did a burglary at the golf course, and I ended up catching him.
He robbed a golf course?
Well, yeah, but he didn't do it with bombs. He would do it in the middle of the night. But I took him to jail, and I can't remember his name, but he started to come into church here. And we told him to leave his bombs at home. No, and I believe that he came to Christ.
Bomb Benny, bringing him to church.
I can't. But Sandy couldn't believe it. I said, that's the bomb maker, But I mean,
that's awesome, buddy.
You cannot always judge a book by its cover.
No, that's awesome.
It was a good experience for me. And I took a lot of heat from Mayor Kathy Golden for taking my breaks here. I'd come in for my 15-minute coffee breaks and
at church.
Yeah, and talk with Andy, And she wrote the chief of police saying that I needed to be fired for taking breaks. But, Ashland Hills was freshly built, and the police chief himself said, I want you to take your coffee breaks, not just me, but all of us, take your coffee breaks at Ashland Hills and give them some police presence. Well, I didn't do it. I kept coming here.
What's Ashland Hills?
It's that big hotel out on the south end of town, across from the Oak Tree restaurant.
Okay.
Dennis Slattery was the manager there for years, And now then, I can't think of the guy that owns it now, but it's a huge hotel, and it was really nice, wonderful food and everything else. And but they want the police chief at that time wanted some acknowledgement from them that they were getting good police protection. Well, I was protecting the church. That's what I was doing.
They couldn't fire you. You were arresting and converting bomb makers, keeping the town safe.
Hey, they had an issue there, and I'm not bragging. I taught firearms. I taught pepper mace. I taught baton. I taught pursuit driving. I did that for Phoenix and Talent, because they didn't have enough training officers. And
wow.
Because
you were skilled. You had come from
Orange
service.
County, Orange County.
And you probably
and
learned stuff in the military. And
yeah.
Wow. Well, that's incredible, buddy. So you started coming here. What year was that?
Well, we moved up here in 1978, and so that's the first time that we would go to the Bible studies out of Clay Street community. There would be 10 people with patchouli oil, and me and Sandy all holding hand with all these
patchouli oil?
The hippies.
What is patchouli oil?
Patchouli, that's used to cover the marijuana, the smell of marijuana. We didn't care. I mean, it was Calvary. It was
wow.
Andy. Andy was a Calvary dude, and we loved it. And then we had John Corson blessing us too,
Wow.
It was neat.
So that kind of brings up like an interesting plot piece I didn't realize. I didn't realize you were such great friends with Andy Green. So what was that like? Because Andy was the founding pastor here, and then he had to go.
Right.
And that must have been a really hard season for the church. That's where Pastor Mark came from.
Yeah.
The elders asked him to step in and pastor the church. But what was that like for you as a close friend? Because you've stayed here all these years.
I have, and I think I'll stay here till I assume room temperature. I really believe that. They say never, never, never say never. Andy, when he went south, he started because he changed. Of course, when you start doing things that you shouldn't be doing, you change. And
yeah.
Don Downing, and I'm probably giving you too much, and I'm talking too much, but Don Downing was a guy. He and I cooked for the skaters and everything, and we had big, nice dinners. We'd go to Costco and buy all this stuff and everything, and bring it in, and feed them in the gym from 12 to 1. And the last 15 minutes was devoted to somebody getting up there and speaking about the Lord.
Wow.
And these skaters were in there and everything else. And but Andy would come in there when he had strayed a little bit. And he'd say, and he really ridiculed me. "Don't you love me, buddy? The Bible says you're supposed to love me." I said, "I know that, Andy." And he said, "You got to love me. You don't have a choice." And it was very difficult for me at that point to say, yeah, And then he went to Hawaii eventually and came back and had contacted the cancer. And my daughter was going to Table Rock. And she kept telling me, "Dad, you need to go to Table Rock Wednesday nights. Andy's teaching." She told me that for a couple of weeks, and Sandy said, "You need to go see Andy." And here again, I did, and after his message, I jumped up on the stage and we cried.
Wow.
It's tough.
Yeah.
He was such a good friend.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. How long did he fight the cancer?
I don't really know, because he had spent his time in Hawaii. And so Pastor Tom, I think was the guy's name, brought him back and gave him the opportunity to continue his teaching.
Wow.
And the place was packed.
Wow.
It was packed because everybody knew Andy because of Rock of Ages, his radio show, and stuff like that. And he was a wonderful speaker.
Wow.
He needed to do away from with the handstands on the pulpit, though. Every now and then he'd do a handstand
On the pulpit?
No, he was a little different that way. He was just an old hippie, that God took over with
Wow.
him. It's cool. Cool.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, buddy.
It's good to get some of this stuff out.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, it's also amazing how small of a world it is. Like the church I grew up in, came from, I didn't realize that Andy went there for a bit while he was healing spiritually at Calvary Corvallis. That's what I've been told. Yeah.
I
never
know
would have known that. In fact, I was at an event, 2 years ago when I met his wife. She was there serving.
Paige.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Small
Yeah.
world. She's a really cool woman.
You don't want to mess with her.
You don't want to mess with her, but she opened her Bible up. She goes,
yeah.
I want you to see this. And she opens her Bible up, and my name's in it. She said, I pray for you and your wife every day.
Yeah. She was the aerobics instructor here, and Sandy went to her class and everything. And I mean, she was a pit bull, man. I mean, she had these women in shape and everything. She was great. And she was a bodybuilder and everything, and I guess she participated in shows and
Wow.
like that. And the gentleman that she married looked a little bit like Andy.
Really?
Yeah, that is true. Sandy says, it looks like Andy. I said, shh. No, I'm sorry.
So you've been here ever since.
I'm just as old as dirt. And like I said, I'll be here until I assume room temperature. I hope, and I hope that Sandy gives me another 51 years with her.
Woo! 51 years.
Yeah, and
She still laughs at your jokes.
Yeah.
You paused there for a second.
Yeah, no, she did. Well, yeah, she does. She's got a great sense of humor. She really does, and. Trouble is, she's a whole lot smarter than me. She's the sharpest knife in the drawer in the
She's
family.
amazing. We've had her part of our board now here at ACF, and we love having her here.
She's wonderful. Just she is so gentle. I cannot put it in words. I mean, she just I don't know what the heck she's doing with me, to be honest with you.
Enjoying herself, I think.
I hope so. We have a wonderful daughter too. It's 46 years old, and
Grandkids?
we have one, and that didn't go well. She's 19 now, and she's decided to separate herself not only from her mother, who lives in Central Point, but from us also. And it's she's had some issues emotionally.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily drugs or drinking, but it's kind of in the head type thing. And you do what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up, if I could ask you, if you could give any piece of wisdom or encouragement to the people that have been listening to your story, people at our church, people are going to, listen to this podcast all over, I think. What would you want to say to them? What piece of wisdom or advice would you impart?
Just take your faith and lay it at the Lord's feet. And the big thing is that I feel, and I was fortunate in my marriage to Sandy, that for the men and the women, if you take a spouse, take someone that you really look at and really have the same beliefs that you do. And if they don't have the same beliefs, encourage them, if you're a Christian, to have them come to the Lord also.
Yeah.
Because if you're unevenly yoked, there's going to be issues. Just like me sitting there in Huntington Beach. I'm going to watch a football game. I believe in God. Go ahead and go to church. How dumb could I be? And I still, you just gotta love people. And I've learned a lot to love the unloved ones.
Yeah.
And I like to try to help people if I can.
Yeah.
And Sandy is the same way. And that's what you need to do. We need to bring people to Christ. This world's going to heck in a handbasket. And as we speak, this pandemic just doesn't end, and you got people out there saying, nothing to it. Yeah, right. Let some of your relatives or your friends die from it. Don't tell me that there's nothing to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, buddy.
It's my pleasure. I really do, because I honor you guys, Brett and you and the rest of them, Justin, and all the things that you're doing to encourage these young people to get right with the Lord, and don't be an old fuddy-duddy like Buddy who wasted all those years. And I love this church.
But God had a reason for it.
He did.
Your story, He had a reason for it.
Perry Atkinson on KW used to say, "It's the green pasture with the blue roof." So anyway, yeah, it was neat. I mean, the first years with Andy was just a blessing. It really was. And Paige.
Well, thank you so much again, buddy, for joining us and being here. And your story is amazing. And looking forward to everyone in the body getting a chance to hear it.
Good. Yeah, I hope they do. I mean, it's nothing that cannot be said by a lot of people, because there's a lot of good Christian folk in this place.
But there's only one Buddy Grove. You'll have to catch him here at ACF or on Verified Podcast. God bless you guys.
Thank you, Cody.
Thanks, buddy.
We hope this topic inspired you in your adventure with the Lord. Stay tuned each week for a new podcast. And if you want to support us, not only can you subscribe to our podcast, but you can also spread the word with other friends or family. Maybe it would also be a blessing to them. Well, until next time, may the Lord bless you.